Must be a very good facilitator. That. Anyway, good morning. My name is Ryan. I am a life coach and a member of Unity here. And I was putting together some things, and I do a group here on Thursday nights that's about, I guess you can say the best way to explain it, relationship recovery. And it is a furtherance usually of some sort of recovery. We have a lot of guys that have some time, and girls, that have some time in recovery. And this is kind of further down the road. Like if you're new, you don't want to go to Thursday night. But if you've been around and you are, so today's kind of going to get into that, all right? And you can see the topic, opening the door to enlightenment. Doesn't that sound like a rocket ship just ready to take off, right? Wow, opening the door. The truth is that I think any endeavors that are towards spirit is a beginning. It doesn't take much, just a little bit. I saw went to the Sanger, I guess it's okay if I say that, last night, and they had there was a story of the Temptations. And one of the things that they all did, especially in the early days, whenever they did everything, they would join hands and pray. Some old school type of praying, but even though they had some of the similar things that they dealt with in life, we do, they still did not overlook the fact that there was some sort of higher power, and like I said, they would, in the 50s, late 50s and early 60s, it was traditional kind of, but it still was just like what we're saying, it is a beginning of, anything is a beginning. In recovery, we start people at a beginning, okay? And in other words, you're not going to get this thing without this beginning. It's just the way it is, So with the methodology that we use, we allow any sort of higher power that you can come up with in the beginning, because we don't have I guess you could say, we don't have in Unity, we're open to all sorts, and I use that same type of methodology, and what I mean by that is that you can believe whatever you want as long as it's not you. You see what I'm saying? That's the start. So anyway, this is here's our door, right? And then I did the little push thing. It was kind of a poke at Abraham Hicks. She's always talking about, you don't need to push, you don't need to, so I put it on there. It's I guess a little bit of a realization. And I'm going to say this, one of the things that I talk about with the different types of beginnings, I guess you could say, is that it really just comes to a point to where you have to just have an idea of an open door. You see what I'm saying? And in recovery circles, they call it willingness is the key. That's the key to the door. Okay, so okay, but we're going to get into some regular spiritual unity kind of thinking, right? Like I always do. First thing we're going to do is define Wikipedia, the Age of Enlightenment, or Enlightenment, also known as the Age of Reason, the intellectual and philosophical movement that occurred in Europe, especially Western Europe in the 13th and 18th centuries, with global influences and effects. Okay? For here, and there's still the beginnings of America, where they talked about as this age of enlightenment, getting away from the monarchy of Great Britain. So Franklin, Jefferson, Adams, Madison, okay, but then we have our own, okay? And these are some of the things, if you've been paying attention to the history that I've been doing, this is our guys. Of course, we have Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, but the beginnings, if you know your history, Quimby, Mary Baker Eddy, Henry Curtis Hopkins, Ernest Holmes, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. Then we can go into today's Today's guys, I mentioned Abraham, and some of my gurus. Wayne Dyer is always a big one, right, for me. And the even some of the newer ones, Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden. These are all guys that are new thought type of orientated, like similar to what we believe here. So okay, so there you go. So that's how I start. Okay, continuing. Always Buddhism. Buddhism has a lot to do with some of the different things that we Eastern, and I'm going to show a grid at the very end, talking about Eastern and Western type of philosophies. But anyway, what it says, be mindful. And that sounds like, okay, what is mindful? So we're going to do the most direct way to free ourselves from the world of conditioned reality, the world of thinking, which hinders us from seeing the absolute truth. So let's just go right into the regular social media. Everything is socially conditioned today. Everything. You know, in other words, how you think, what you should think, how you're on this side and that side. And what they're trying to say is we should be on no side. We should be, in other words, especially to open that door, the human stuff is going to be very limited. And I think that's the biggest thing. Not to participate in any conditional realities. Mindfulness is a type of meditation in which you focus on, and I'm trying to give everybody their credit here. This comes from the Mayo Clinic, okay? Mindfulness is a type of meditation in which you focus on being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling in that moment. Think about where we were just 4 minutes ago, right? Without interpretation or judgment. Practicing mindfulness involves breathing methods, guided imagery, and other practices to relax the body and mind and reduce stress. Excuse me. So basically, what they're saying is that you should come to Unity of Memory on Wednesday night and do our meditation here. I'm just kidding a little cheap shot there, but an expensive shot. But I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'm going to use in some of the early Wayne Dyer talks, he always talked about every time he would ask Deepak Chopra, what should I do about certain situations, his answer was always to meditate, meditate, meditate. No matter what was happening, no matter what, meditate. Okay, continuing, just some more matter-of-fact stuff. The Tao, familiar with the Tao? If you gotta ask, baby, you don't know, right? Anyway, this is a Lao Tzu, and this is also some Eastern. This verse 3, I forgot how many verses, but it's not that many. It's just a small book if you want to read them all. When you stop feeding the self-image and separate I, withers, the veil parts, the doorway of enlightenment opens, flow is experienced, separation falls, and no other remains. Now this is something. Separation is something that I'm very, hard with other teachings, because I do not believe that we can be separated from Source ever under any circumstances, no matter what you did, how you did it, when you did it. You cannot be separated. Now, I make a lot of people mad when I say that because their teachings teach different things than what I just said. But I have my own reasons why I do not believe that we can be separated. It's just not possible. Okay? So, continuing, University of Metaphysical Sciences. Doesn't that sound enlightening? It goes like this: the spiritual awakening process can be transformative and life-changing experience, but it is not always easy. It can be challenging and difficult because it involves a profound transformation of one's consciousness in a way of being that requires willingness to confront deep-seated patterns, beliefs, and emotions. Spiritual awakening difficulties are common and to be expected. Difficulties and challenges are impossible to avoid during the spiritual awakening process. So, anyway, that's kind of what we're going to touch on, because we're about to enter my world here, where I the things that we do. Okay, and I guess um, what I'm saying is that it seems like we can just come to Unity of Metairie, say a few prayers, and we are enlightened. Okay, and I'm going to say this in my days of going to see speakers, and I've seen all of the guys. These days some of it's just on YouTube, stuff like that. But I've actually seen the Pope, John Paul, a long time ago, and the Dalai Lama, right? We've seen them both. And I remember at the Dalai Lama, people were saying, Happy Enlightenment, Now, in his talk, he very much talked to his base. And it wasn't all that enlightening. Now, some of the things, I bought a book and I read that. That was enlightening, you know what I'm saying? But the idea that you could just come in, think it was $13 to get in, right? Pay you $13 and sit down and you're God. It's like, no, not quite. But like I said in the beginning, we're going to open the doors, okay? So let's come into my world. When we talk about, the first thing we do is we get people to believe in something. It doesn't have to be anything. It can be, it can just be an idea. It can be the group. It can be us, okay? And I guess what we're trying to get at is I start doing some of these, and in 12-step groups, it is the steps, okay? So the first two of them are to start to just believe. And then you get into what's called a house cleaning, okay? So my point is, and then the final steps are really what we're talking about today. And one of the steps it says is having had a spiritual awakening. Okay, what's that mean? A lot of people don't know what that means. Like, well, was it something that we just experienced with the meditation? Perhaps that could be part of it. But this is something that people get stuck with. Okay, and this is where it starts. Emotional bricks. I made up that term, I think. I have never had anybody use it quite the way I do. And the point I'm getting at is that things get stuck in here. Now, there's a guy named John Bradshaw talks about the nature of addictions, and I'm talking about addictions of relational sorts, not substances. The nature is abuse, and our dysfunctional families, and our dysfunctional world. Some things just naturally occur because it's something that is necessary for us to get past, or one of our tests of this particular lifetime. But some of these bricks get stuck, and it kind of makes enlightenment or opening the door very limited. Okay, and knowing too much can be. Anyway, so this is all me. I just wrote this down. Okay, we just talked about it. What can hinder our enlightenment process? Stuck emotions. Okay, unresolved hurts, scars, abuse issues, behavior based on ego or attention getting, and it's a cover-up, okay, to perceive shame. Grandiose thought process, another dysfunctional cover-up, okay, it's all, these are natural things that occur within the psyche that are really just trying to keep us from the hurt, okay, and some of it is natural and some of it's necessary, because sometimes when people are experiencing extreme abuse, it's very difficult to try and to absorb it. And if you go back into like 7-year-old kids, or some of these the things that can happen in dysfunctional homes with girls and all that stuff, it's like if you really had to handle it head on, it's too much for somebody who's 13. You see what I'm getting at? So these behaviors they raise to the top, and they are a defense mechanism, okay? Some of it, in my opinion, is God-given because it's tough stuff to have to deal with some of these realities of life, okay? All right, next one, blaming. That's a good one. Today's world, we blame everybody, right? And it's the same thing. It's another one of those cover-ups or whatever on the inside. Because if and there's another one too, just plain, and because this one here, just, just plain old fear. And of course, where does the fear come from? This is the idea of whatever, okay? Now, they talk about in recovery circles that we suffer from 100 or 1,000 forms of fear. Okay, and if you've ever been in those circles, you realize that everything is based on fear. Everything. And inability to try something outside of what you already know. And I put on there unity, new thought. Most of the time, people ask me about my own faith, and you start telling them about it. Oh, it doesn't really fit with what I know. And I'm not going that way. We did it a certain way all our lives, and that's what my mama did. And we ain't looking at it differently. And it's like, okay. So in other words, I know. And Wayne Dyer does a whole talk on knowing too much, and that's something that was formidable with me as far as realizing that everything that I thought was right and real now is limited, you know. So anyway, and then lying to oneself, believing one's own lies. We know about denial. All of us know what denial is, right? Projecting unwanted fears displaced onto another person. Pay attention here that I'm really describing dysfunctional family here. That's what's going on here, and the dynamics that happens in that. 10, intellectualizing. Person avoids uncomfortable emotions by focusing on facts and logic, or better yet, through my process of trying to be enlightened, things are in the way, just like it said in that metaphysical thing, that there's going to be some uncomfortable things. So instead of dealing with it and looking at it and wondering why and how it happened and how we can pass that, because you're not going to get past it if you don't admit that it's there and realize it and then come to grips with it, closure, like they say, and then move on. If I take and I try and fly above it all, over the top, and I touch it, then it's not going to come to any resolution. It's just not. Next, codependency and taking the feeling of others. And you hear a lot of people talk about being an empath. Sometimes I just think they're playing codependent. That's my opinion, right? I think it's great, and I think there's a lot of people who are empathetic, but sometimes it can be delusional thinking or thinking you feel, because of a certain dysfunctional malady that we grew up with, and it leads to this later in life. And it is also a grandiose kind of thing if it's misplaced. Now, I'm sure that there are real empaths everywhere. I'm not trying to insult them in any way, but what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of sickness and a lot of people back to the same thing, think they know. And it's not really all that valid. And then the last one that I got is, I just started writing, and I went through them, all of the things that people, and here's rationalization, and then more mind manipulation. All right, when I can rationalize anything. I can rationalize anything. In my non-recovery circles, including the one in my own head, I have a defense attorney that is really good. Just leaving me blameless on everything. And it comes from that idea of the dysfunctional family, that to be wrong is bad. You see what I'm saying? So my mind just automatically goes into some sort of defense. And the same thing happens. It's going to hinder the idea. It's not going to block, none of these are going to block you totally, but it's going to limit. And that's what we want. We want to stop any sort of limitation so we can get to that point. As you can see, we've been stuck at dysfunctional junction. Is that nice? We've been stuck in dysfunctional behaviors. Being stuck can rule out or at least hinder limit the progress. Also, it can deter to the point that a client thinks that enlightenment doesn't exist. How many people have tried some of our methodologies, like the law of attraction, that we all try and it doesn't work? And that's spend the rest of your life saying, well, that don't work. But it's been my experience that it does. As a matter of fact, what's been happening with me in the past year, especially, there's been fantastic results. Like there's no doubting it. My faith, and it didn't come from me. My faith is tremendous. You know, it is. Let me just say it this way: how do you doubt things that it's working? You see what I'm saying? Like it works. You know, so to sit there and say, "Wow, I couldn't." It's the same, and sometimes we get that in recovery circles where they won't try it, or they'll try it a little bit. Wow, that doesn't work for me. I've been there before. We tried that. I've seen more soothsayers and doctors and everything else, and nothing works on me. Well, guess what? That's an affirmation in itself of negativity, and it's going to come true. It is coming true. You know. So let's go. We got a couple, and this is what we did on Wednesday. And I have this whole dialogue, and this, remember, it's relational stuff on one paragraph or another of I am toxic shame, right? I need a drum roll for that. So what I'm really getting at is this is what rules the world today. Today's world is done all through toxic. You can't go to most religions without being shamed for something. Our politics is just totally, we don't even use logic anymore. It's all about shaming one side and the other, and it goes on and on. And it's like, okay, I get it, it works. You know, it's a method that works, but the truth is, we're not talking about them and how they do it. We're talking about us and how to get past anything that's in the way. So, let me just do a little paragraph here. Shame is an affect, which is the source of many complex and disturbing inner states. And I want you to notice how they go clinical on this definition. Depression, alienation, self-doubt, isolation, loneliness, paranoid and schizoid phenomena, compulsive disorders, splitting of self, perfectionism, a deep sense of inferiority, inadequacy or failures, or so-called borderline conditions and disorders of narcissism. Wow. Well, most clinicians probably would not equate that on a spiritual level. You see what I'm saying? They're going to want you to do talk therapy. Maybe we can prescribe some antidepressants or something like that. I'm not knocking either one of those things, but it's been my experience that from a spiritual perspective, opening the door of enlightenment, that seems to work better and more than anything. You see what I'm saying? You start basing your own identity on what spirit thinks of you and what you think of spirit. And it's never negative, ever. You see what I'm getting at? So you're in this situation where instead of sitting there constantly going over the abuses of yesterday, which I'm not trying to take it away, or think that you can just say some sort of prayer or have an enlightening kind of situation, that you can get to a point to where that can go round and round and round and never come to a point to where you can raise your head up and move further and higher to where you can say things like that. I just said that it's working. It is always working, you know. I want everybody to understand I am human right now. I'm dealing with lots of things in my own household with people that are not well. I spent last year dealing with my mom, and she was 90 years old, and it was hard, okay? What gave me, I guess, the ability to move on and to handle it is people in this room, people in my recovery circles, and hanging on to a faith and a door that sometimes seemed closed, and just believing and not staying stuck in the idea that this is going to be a negative thing, it's going to be forever. Even when it's happening, it's not a negative thing, because I have learned, it's a little bit of recovery talk, that God does not do things to me anymore. He only does things for me. And if I'm dealing with something, it means that there is something to be learned from it, or some sort of growth that's going to bring me to a high knowledge and a higher spiritual plane. And like I said, it works every time, you know. So, and I kind of said this, our church is probably, yeah, we kind of got all of it. And even employment or sex patterns, ego states, they're all based in shame. Okay? We can relate that this world is dysfunctional no matter where we are. Okay? The functionality can begin in rooms like this. In other words, when it's not such just a world of judgment and everybody's right and everybody's wrong and the blaming that we talked about, it's like, stop. We'd like to go on a different avenue. They're going to whirl, the whirling dervishes. They're going to whirl and they're going to whirl and they're going to whirl. I don't have to be part of that, you know. But more importantly, I don't have to be part of it in my mind. And I think that's the big thing. That is why I haven't watched the news in years. I got a buddy of mine who's really political. What do you mean you don't watch the news? How are you going to know what's going on? And I just looked at him and said, I don't have to. I got you. In a way, that's kind of true, but there's no way of getting around it. You know, with the polarization of today, you're trying to be grabbed at every angle that there is, and you can't. And this is kind of crazy. Sometimes you can watch somebody baking a loaf of bread on one of the social media things, and somebody has to compare it to some sort of political action or person or something. Come on, man, we talk about bread, Can't we just stay with baking the bread? You see what I'm saying? They can't, because it's so ingrained in and that's what I'm trying to say, is that I not tell anybody not to have, ideas. I'm not telling anybody that should think a certain way or not think a certain way. I'm just saying that the shame of it and the dysfunctional, that's what we would like to step away from. Let them do that. They're more qualified, you know. Let us stay in more of a point of being productive within our own selves and living within our own skin and being comfortable with that, you know. I don't know if you remember the feeling you had when we were in the meditative state, but it can be a real place of comfort. And I can describe for you. You want to hear mine? It's really good. I'm on a mountain plateau, and there's a small, little, clear, kind of bluish lake on top of the plateau. There's blue skies, and the clouds are going over, and the birds are chirping, and there's butterflies, especially monarchs. I'm partial to those. And they're all there. And sometimes I take my feet and put it in that cool water, and the breeze is kind of blowing. And at that point, that's lots of times I'll get a little spirit guide that'll come through there, or reveal something in my mind that might be a sticking point, or something that's bothering me, or something that I can bring to the front, or something that I'm grateful for. Don't forget that side of it, okay? And I can just, that's a beautiful place, In my mind, there's almost nowhere as nice as that, at least on earth, you know, that this is the place that I would love to stay there, and never come back. But the reality is that I use that sort of methodology so I can come back and handle things and deal with some of the things that I work with a lot of guys and girls, mostly guys, but I work with them every day. Phone rings all the time. I have a business that we're coaching people. I have probably people that I've been working with for more than 20 years, and they depend on me. And sometimes I feel like I wish I don't have anybody quite like me in my world, But the truth is that this is the path that I've chosen, and I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I see tangible results all the time. And one thing that goes along with all of that, you have to have plenty of patience to do that, And if you don't, you're in the wrong business. Maybe you should check on something else to do for a living. But the reality is that that's something that I started doing more than 2 decades ago, and I've become very good at it. And it is probably one of the most rewarding types of situation that anybody can encounter. One person passing along something that allows them to become enlightened in the long run is tremendous. You know, I mean, it's something you can hang your hat on that. You know, it's anyway. This is kind of some old school stuff. I don't know if you can, but it's fear, guilt, and shame. Okay, and it talks about here Eastern culture, and it's like a little pie or whatever, donut, whatever you want to call it. And you can say in Eastern cultures, shame is greater. In our world, guilt. And in other words, that's what I grew up with guilt manipulation. That was the methodology at all times. I never knew anything else until I grew up and started realizing that really none of that really holds water. But something that they showed us years ago, I was studying counseling, that sort of thing, and they showed that the Japanese culture were very much shame orientated. It didn't take much, and they stayed in line. They were very controllable because of the shame. You see, and around the world, there's a lot of governments that have religion built into them and that sort of thing, and it's all about shame and fear. You know, in some places, if you think or say the wrong thing, you might not live to see tomorrow. And look, I always bring into this, you know, talking about breaking the chains that bind and from the shame and all of that. If you study the life of Jesus Christ, just speaking to people, he could have been put to death just right there on the spot. You know, there was no fair government. They ruled, and that was that. You know, sometimes we can talk about how when things aren't right in our world or whatever. Imagine living in a world like that, or imagine living in a place, in some of the places in the eastern part of the world where they will kill you for your belief if you don't believe the way they do. Put you in jail, you know, or whatever. And it's I think what I'm trying to get at though is that how much of that, where's the functionality? We're talking worldwide. Where is it? All right? It's not a whole lot of it. And one thing that helps is we get a little older, we start seeing through it. And then we can get into situations like what we're in right now, where we grow above it, where we grow past it, beyond it. So where we're able to see it like it is, and we're not manipulated. Even if something's wrong to the point to where we're being influenced from another side, it doesn't mean that we have to suffer the consequences or we have to believe a certain way. We do whatever we want. And I think there's better ways, but the reality is that's pretty much where we're going with it. The grid is a pretty decent grid to show what's going on. This is where we ended on Thursday night, to break the cycle of shame. And there was a guy out there, and he said, okay, so how do we break this cycle of shame? Raise his hand right there. And you know what I told him? Come back next Thursday. But anyway, that's all my information. If anybody's struggling with something like that, especially relational disorders, I'm available. You know, you can check me out. But the point is that, and you can come on Thursday nights. It's free. We pass the basket, throw a couple of bucks in there or something like that. But the reality of it all, the whole thing, the whole enchilada, like they say, where we ultimately would like to go, is what we name this this afternoon's lesson, and that is we would like to be able to be as spiritually broadened as possible, because I have found that is where true happiness lies. We can have anything in the whole world as long as it doesn't have us, you know, and that's pretty much some really good positive affirmations. And I didn't get into any positive as far as some of the things that we do, because we are going to get into that another time, including probably next month or something like that. We're going to talk about some of the affirming things that we can do to knock this out and move into something that's better. And I'm going to end by saying this, that there is especially if you're struggling, something that's better. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.